In today's class, we're gonna do a show and tell with backdrops. I'm gonna show you how I got these backdrops to look the way they do, without going out and having to spend a couple $1,000s on a professional video studio. Before we get any further, make sure to mark your attendance by liking this video. I will be issuing out demerits to anyone who dislikes it and will be promptly asking you to withdraw from the program. I got too much on my mind, I got too much on my plate. You just wanna know, I just need some time and space, I just need another day. I'm gonna show you how to get these various backdrop looks using the Godox TL-120s. We're not gonna go over specs, that's for those of you who wanna take the AP courses. This is basic. If you want the advanced, then you're gonna have to go to another class. This is the practical and nitty-gritty way to get this backdrop look. I'm gonna show you how I set these backdrops up, how I lit them, all within this messy garage. This way, when you show up to a shoot and you need to pull this out, you'll have the knowledge to pull this off. Your coursework for today will be to compare and contrast which backdrop you like the best, and then go ahead and drop a comment in the student community comment section where you can debate amongst your peers. Learning how to use backdrops properly can really up your game as a videographer. Let's be honest, we don't always get the best spaces to work in when we're trying to shoot video. And we are in the business of visual, so our backgrounds must be visually pleasing. And if we show up to a shoot and it doesn't have a nice background, well then we need to pull out our backdrop. The key to getting a good looking backdrop is to make sure that it's lit properly. I saw these Godox TL-120s when they came out and I knew I wanted to get my hands on them to try them out. So I contacted Godox and asked them if they could send me some so I could test them out. I have to say I'm super impressed with them, not just because they sent them to me, but because of how well they perform. Because they're tube lights, they lay the light out consistently across the backdrops, which gives you the perfect look when you're going for a backdrop. I used to have two lights that would kind of shine at my backdrop and it would be really bright where the lights would hit it. But as you got further up the backdrop, the more the light faded out. So sometimes I would have to use 2 and 3 different lights just to make sure that my light was consistent with my backdrops. But not with these awesome tube lights. And they're not only used for backdrop lighting, they can be used for a key light, a fill light, or a hair light. Like right now I have a hair light off to my right side. The first thing that Todd and I do when we're in the preparation process of making a video is we ask ourselves, what type of background do we want? Do we want a backdrop or do we want a background of something that's pertinent to what the person is talking about? Are we going with straight black infinity, which represents professionalism in a serious and dynamic way, and just straight hustle? Or are we going for a white backdrop, which represents purity of heart, but endless opportunities? Or maybe we're just in a dirty space and we want to get that homeliness feel, like an old professor who wants to pass along some information that he has. Sometimes there's no thought at all. It's just, let's throw a backdrop because it looks so good and it definitely looks better than this. And I'm gonna show you guys how I achieved the shot. Either way, the decision is made and then it becomes, well, how are we going to accomplish this? Now that's a great question. The easy answer is to just say, you know what? Make sure all of the light is spread consistently across the backdrop. Make sure the subject's face is a little bit brighter than the backdrop, and also take out all of your wrinkles, kind of like some of this stuff right here. But that's not everything. That's just a quick setup guide. In my opinion, the first thing that you have to do when you want to set up one of these backdrops is control your lighting. So close off all exterior lights, make sure that there's nice black shades over the windows, make sure you turn off all the lights inside of the room, and just get it to almost be pitch black if that's possible. In the past, I've tried to set these backdrops up with some exterior light coming in and it completely ruined my entire shot. So I quickly realized the first step that you need to take is to make sure you control your lighting. After that's complete, you want to set your camera up so that it has enough space between itself and the backdrop. So the way that I do this is I position my camera in front of the backdrop and then I set my lens to whatever I want to use it. Most of the time it's about 50 millimeters. And then I'll move the camera backwards until the backdrop completely fills the entire frame and you don't see any of the exterior perimeter or the rims or those little clamps. Now it goes without saying, you have to be in a pretty big space in order to be able to do this. Right now the camera is about 6 feet away from me and my backdrop is about 6 feet. So there's about 12 feet depth from the camera to the backdrop. The more space you have, the better. Sometimes you come into a situation where you don't have that much room, and in that case, you just bring your camera as close as possible and do your best. So now that you've controlled your lighting and you figured out where you want your camera to be set up in reference to the backdrop, now it's time to start setting up the backdrop and getting all of the wrinkles out. A lot of people say you can use a steamer to get the wrinkles out. I prefer just to use more clips and continue to stretch it out until you don't see any more wrinkles. Don't forget you're gonna be using a lower aperture, so it's going to blur the background out. So you don't have to get it to be perfect. But the more it's stretched out and the less wrinkles you have, the better. Now that I have all the wrinkles, for the most part, out of my backdrop, it's time to light the backdrop. The key here is to make sure that our light is consistent across the backdrop. That's where these tube lights are perfect. I put these grids on the tube light themselves so that I have a more controlled light onto my backdrop. That'll help with consistency and none of this extra light that might be shining back on me and giving me a backlight. Maybe I don't want it, like I did in my last video. This also helps you have more control over what the tube light is seeing. You can get these tube lights to become very bright, and every single one of these backdrops has a light threshold. For example, like with this gray background, I like to keep the lights at about 50%. Whereas if I'm shooting with a white background, I like to blast it at 100%. And then if I'm using that black backdrop or that brick backdrop, I like to keep it at around 25%. So every backdrop is different when it comes to the light intensity. Another cool thing that you can do to kind of change up your backdrop look is you can change the temperature of these lights, which is super cool, and it gives you a whole new creative bank to choose from. All right, so now that I've controlled my lighting, I've set up my camera, and I've got my light set up on the backdrop, now it's time to position the subject. And the best rule of thumb that I can give to you is to put your subject between the camera and the backdrop. That'll give you just enough space to have your backdrop slightly blurred out, but it will also not put your subject super close to the camera. I like to do 50mm because that gives the most realistic look when you're looking at a face. It doesn't make their face look too wide or too thin. The way that I like to shoot my backdrop setups is to use 3 tube lights, 2 on the outside and 1 on the bottom here. And this bottom will just go ahead and give me enough light to kind of fade up through the top. And I kind of like how the top is a little bit darker. But if I wanted to, I would put a 4th tube light right up here to really make sure everything is 100% consistent. But you can do this in many different variations. You could turn off the outside lights and just leave the bottom light on, or you could turn the bottom light off and put a light on top only so that it's shining down. There's just so many different ways that you can make a backdrop look good and make your videos look more professional. I got the TL-120 4-pack kit, and it comes with so many accessories. You can hook all of these lights up together so that they turn on and off at the same time, or you can control their intensity or their light temperature. It comes with a remote and just so many accessories that I could make an entire YouTube channel just going off of these lights. So if you're in the market to have a better lighting system or a better backdrop system for whatever film shoot you're on, I highly recommend these Godox TL-120s. A big thanks to Godox for sending these to me. You'll be seeing these in my videos pretty much from here on out. I'm Joe with the Film Alliance, your professor and life coach, and until the next video, have a nice week. Now that's a great question. If I was a student and you were the teacher, if I was the student, then I would give myself an A+. But since I'm the teacher, I can't give myself anything other than pat on the back. Okay. Now that's a great question. If I was the student and you were the teacher, I would give myself an A+. If I was the student and you were the if I was the student, then I would, okay. Now that's a great question. If I was the student, then I would give myself an A+. But since I'm not, then I won't give myself anything. I won't even say it, doesn't make sense.